Yes. So what I will do, I'd just like to share my screen and just talk about one or two, a couple of slides. I want to approach financing to the SMEs from a different angle. Um, I want to show why it's a challenge to the SMEs to get finance in the first place. And if we can overcome those challenges, then financing SMEs for growth becomes an easy proposition. Yeah. So let me start. Let's share my screen quickly. 1 second. Right. One of the major things is that banks, and I would assume that the other panelists will talk to that at some point. But banks, they have a little problem when you don't have a track record. So if you have a SME that is now starting off, it gets it is very, very difficult for them to get financing at all. You know, um, they can get it from a venture capitalist, but if you go to a bank, you have to make sure that you can convince the bank that you know what you're about. And knowing what you're about is not knowing about the business itself, is knowing about the health, the financial health of the business. So you may have been in operation for say 1 year, 2 years, and you're looking to get a nice little chunk of financing to expand the growth. The bank would want to make sure you have a couple things in place. And the bank has a kind of another solid criteria. And when I say solid, that you can follow. It's normally very, very vague. So some banks will follow what I call the 4 C's. They're looking for capital, character, cash flow, uh, and um, and um, uh, capacity. And when I say capacity, I mean the ability to service the debt. Now, if you don't have a good track record, it becomes a little difficult to prove some of those things for the bank, for them to get a little comfort to be able to lend you money. Yeah. The other challenge is financial literacy. So you can go to the bank and tell them all you know about the particular product and stuff. But if the banker can look at your financial records and tell you the state of health of your company in a manner that you don't even know, then the bank will be somewhat reticent in lending you money. So and a lot of small business entrepreneurs, they need to get financially literate. And when I say financial, they don't have to be accountants. As Angela said earlier, accountants are boring people, but they must hold on to certain metrics that will allow them to understand the financial health of the business. Yeah. So that is a biggie. If you don't completely understand your business in terms of the financial health, you would get much difficulty. There was a banker who once said, if I can tell you more about your business financial health by looking at your financial reports than then I am not going to offer you a loan. That was an actual quote from a banker. So the particular entrepreneur don't have to be an accountant, but they must have some knowledge of certain financial metrics. And in what a lot of business owners do is they throw that in the hands of the accountant. They say, well, look, you handle my taxes, you handle this, but it must be a consultative effort. And what happens over time, either through osmosis or otherwise, is that the business owner becomes the profit driver of the business. He becomes the profit expert because he would have learned certain terms, he'd have learned certain metrics that if he don't see those numbers, he know that the business is getting into trouble. And now there's a difference between profit and cash flow. So you must understand the profit of the business, but you must also understand the cash flow of your business, which we'll talk a little later. Yeah. Now, since the bank doesn't have a standardized criteria, it is like, for instance, if you go into to buy a car, the bank will say, well, look, we will finance 60%, you come in with 40%, or we'll finance 75%. We call that transaction-related businesses, as opposed to relationship businesses, where if a business go to the bank and say, look, we want to expand to grow into the future, that is a little more vague. So the bank want you to satisfy certain criteria, and there will be more emphasis in some areas than other areas. Yeah. And again, we talked about those criteria. One will be capacity, capital, character, collateral, and sometimes conditions. And the conditions we're talking about is whether you can meet certain conditions going forward. Yeah. Now, when we talk about capacity, the the company must be able to show the bank that this business will have the capacity, or more specifically, the cash flow to service this debt that they're looking to get. Yeah. Now, a lot of people go to the bank with talk. You want to go to the bank with two things. One, you want to go to the bank with a profit projection for the next year or so. And definitely you want to go to the bank with a cash flow forecast. You know, the bank will understand that you understand the business, because when you make a sale, that sale is not cash. In a lot of instances, that sale is credit. So you may give the person 30 days to pay, you know. Um, and so the profit statement may be saying that this company is profitable, but it may be starved of cash because you're making sales, but you're not collecting money. On the other hand, you may be buying inputs, you may be buying materials, and you may be forced to pay immediately because you don't have sufficient credit from your suppliers. You know, a company like that, it will be profitable on paper, but that company could be ringing or tolling the debt knell. You know, that company is heading for the grave. You know, um, and another one is that let's spin on from that. So you must demonstrate that capacity to repay. And that capacity to repay is not profit. That capacity to repay is in profitability. Yeah. You want to be able to show the banker that this particular project is generates cash flow. And I want to deal a little more with that at the end of these couple of slides I'm going to be sharing here. Yeah. Um, and finally, you may not have collateral. And this is sometimes a big hindrance for banks that are not venture capitalist oriented. And most banks are not. A venture capitalist is somebody who will take inordinate risk. You know, banks are not in the business of doing that. A bank is there to collate depositors' funds and take reasonable risks to ensure that the depositors get back the money in the future. Yeah. So when people criticize banks for not taking, not being more risk seeking, they don't really understand the purpose of a bank, you know, of a normal deposit taking bank. Now, if you put your bank at risk, the whole economy could come crashing down. And we experienced this in the late 1990s, the early 2000s in Jamaica, where the banking system collapsed. And it took them about 10 years to come out of that. Because banking is not about money, you know, banking is about confidence. If people lose confidence in the bank, there will be a massive run. So, yeah, so you want to ensure at all times that the people maintain confidence. If person here, the bank down the road is under stress, your bank will also be under stress, because you wouldn't have enough funds. No bank keep enough money in the coffers to be able to pay back all the depositors. Remember, the bank will make money by lending out the money that it gets from the depositors, right? So when they lend that out, they don't have it. So if all the depositors walk in the bank and say we want our money, that bank will crash. You know, and the lender of last resort, which is normally the central bank in most countries, they wouldn't be able to supply enough money to the banks for them to survive. Yeah. So a lot of banks, unless they're very innovative, and there are some that are, they will seek collateral. If you are SME and you're very young in the game, they will seek collateral as a secondary source of repayment. If you don't have collateral, it will be a hard sell for you to show them your cash flow projections and say, look, this is what I will rely to pay back the debt. You know, so you are looking to raise debt on cash flow. You know, say the future cash flows will repay you debt. Some banks may not be brave enough to do that. They will also want collateral. You may not have the kind of collateral that, so like for instance, if you're in a restaurant business, that kind of collateral, like pots and pans and fridges and stove, those are what we call working assets. Those things could leave the business before the banker get down to seize those assets. Yeah. If you have a big building and you have land and you have plant, bankers will be more interested in that kind of asset, but that kind of asset wouldn't walk away. Yeah. So, having said that, most companies who go out for financing, they don't look inside first. And inside, make sure that they are not managing the cash optimally. So, what I'm saying here is we need to manage the cash cycles. So like, for instance, in one of the consultancies I was on, I went into the business and the person said, well, I need $2 million more to finance X. And when I did an analysis of the cash cycle, they can get at $2 million just by managing the cash cycle better. Yeah. And what do I mean by managing the cash cycle better? Yeah. This is what it looks like. You have a business. So you place your order and then the stock arrives. And at some point in time, you will pay for that material. Yeah. Now, you would have gotten credit, from the time the stock reach into your doors until you pay for that material. But when you pay for that material, you haven't sold the material as yet. So you are now out of pocket. Yeah. We call that period the accounts payable period. The amount of days it takes before you, so the person might have given you 30 days, it takes you 30 days before you pay out the money. But then you haven't sold, you may have taken that raw material and now you're manufacturing it, right? And when you finish manufacturing, you now sell the good. But in selling the good, you may not sell it all for cash. You may sell it on credit and give the person, say, 30 days. So they will now pay you 30 days hence. And that is what we call the accounts receivable period. Now, you would have paid out money at the end of the accounts payable period. So you're out of pocket. And depending on how long that accounts receivable period is, you would need financing for that period. So the objective is really to keep that accounts receivable period as short as possible, or get the accounts payable period to be as long as possible. Yeah. So from the time you order the goods arrive on your premises to the time you get the cash for the sale of the goods, we normally call that the operating cycle. And what is more important is not the operating cycle. What is more important is the management of the cash cycle. The time the cash leaves the business and the time that you get compensated at the end. And that period is normally the cash cycle. Yeah. So to put in another way, the cash cycle is the operating cycle minus the amount of credit that you get, i.e. the accounts payable period. The cash cycle is really the operating cycle, the time the goods arrive to the time you get compensated, minus the amount of credit you get. So if you get a large amount of credit from your suppliers, that cash cycle gets smaller and smaller and smaller. Yeah. And that cash cycle is what we call a positive, and as a matter of fact, that cash cycle is what we call a positive cash cycle. Ideally, if you could get that cash cycle to be negative, minus X days, oh, you're in second heaven. And I just put that question out there, do you think there are businesses out there that have negative cash cycles? That is, the accounts payable period extends way beyond the time that you receive cash. And the answer to that is yes. So if you look at a grocery not supposed to have cash problems at all, because they buying stuff, and a lot of the stuff they buy, they get credit. But when they sell stuff, they sell all this stuff on cash. When you come out of a grocery, they don't give you that long time. And I don't say long time, I am 65 years old. So I am talking about 40 something years ago, 50 something years ago. The Chinese parlor might have give you credit. But when you go, there are no Chinese parlor giving you credit again. When you go to the grocery now, you have to pay cash when you pass through the turnstile. But that grocery person may have 6 or 7 or 8 or 40 branches throughout the country. And somebody want to distribute their product through the grocery, they will come and say, well, you want to buy my product? You say, well, yes, give us 45 days credit, because we have all the brick and mortar there. We can sell your product all over Trinidad and Tobago, all over Barbados, all over Jamaica, all over Guyana. So you're willing to do that because you don't have to put down any brick and mortar. Yeah. So you give them the credit. But when they sell your product, they sell it for cash. So if they buy your product today, you give them 45 days credit and they sell your product within a week, then they are utilizing your money over and over and over before they pay you. Yeah. So they have what we call a negative cash cycle. Amazon is another one like that. Amazon is one who so most businesses wouldn't have that. Most businesses will look something like this. The product is ordered, and then you pay for the product, and then you get into a period where you're out of pocket. That red bar there is where you're out of pocket until the customer pays. And that there puts you into cash debt. So some businesses will be in cash debt for 130 days. 130 days, for all intents and purposes, is more than 4 months. You don't want that. You want to bring that down. Now, if you bring that down, all of a sudden you realize that you don't need financing. You will be you will have enough financing there to continue growth. So companies need to do that. They need to control their cash cycle better. So a lot of my concern, the first thing I do is I analyze the company's cash cycle. I calculate their accounts payable days, I calculate their accounts receivable days, I calculate their inventory days. Some companies are of the belief that having high inventory is a good thing because it allows them not to have stockouts. But high inventory costs, because to have high inventory, you have to have higher insurance. You have to put out capital that is sitting there. So if you go in there and your inventory is sitting on your hands for 6 months, that is not a good thing. That is not a good thing. So you want to make sure you have the optimum level of inventory. You want to make sure you get the maximum amount of credit. And when you give people credit, 30 days must not be equivalent to 60 days. Some people get credit and they just kind of ride you. And they won't pay you money because they pay the people who make the most noise. So if you sit down there and say, well, he's a good customer, they will just keep stretching you out. Or they bounce up somebody like Dottin, who after 30 days, Dottin call me every single day. Where my money? You know what I mean? So you need to manage that better. So I want to just kind of say that those are some of the challenges that SMEs face, basically. SMEs are not Amazon. Amazon, if you look at Amazon and you calculate their cash conversion cycle, you realize that they are negative. They are not positive. When you buy something on Amazon, they take it out of your credit card. It's normally that takes about 2 days for that credit card purchase to register in their account. But the person who they're buying from, they have 45 days credit from them, 30 days credit from them. So they always in a negative cash cycle, which is good. So Amazon makes money out of placing this excess cash on deposit. So even though they may place it on deposit that pays them 75 basis points or 150 basis points, 150 being a percentage and a half, they're making money on somebody else's money. Yeah. Okay. So there's a compare both. You have a situation here where you'll have an Amazon that looks something like this, where that green is a negative cash cycle, whereas the normal company will have something that looks like this, where you have that red. And your objective in the normal company, unless you're a grocery, and if you're a grocery and you're struggling in terms of cash flow, but then something is wrong. If you're a grocery, you're supposed to have a negative cash cycle. And a negative cash cycle is not a negative cash flow. A negative cash cycle is a good thing. A negative cash flow is a bad thing. Yeah. So if you're a grocery, you buy it on credit, but you're selling for cash. Yeah. Groceries depend on turnover. So that thing ain't supposed to stay on your hands for long. Their inventory turnover is supposed to be quick. So they wouldn't stock up an inventory to last 6 months. Yeah. A lot of inventory perishables anyhow. Yeah. And have expiration dates. Okay, so I want to kind of end my little spiel there and just kind of summarize by saying that these are some of the things that when I focus based on some of the consultancy assignments I've gone on, these are some of the things I have noticed for SMEs. No track record is a biggie. So you have to impress the banker when you go for this financing for growth. And to impress them, you must go there showing that you have a certain amount of financial literacy. you understand what will keep this business going. Yeah. Again, you don't have to be an accountant to do that. But if you interface a lot with your accountant, you will and you learn at least a basic you have a basic understanding of reading your financials, the banker will be impressed. The banker must not be able to tell you how healthy your company is. You know, you must know that. Yeah. Right. So you must be able to demonstrate to the banker a certain amount of capacity to service the debt. And um, in the event that you do have collateral, your cash flow statement should be strong. Now, if you present a cash flow statement or a profit projection, do your best to hit those targets, because that is where the relationship will build. Because they say, look, this guy, because there's a whole difference between that transaction banking and that relationship banking. If you can hit those targets, if you can pay back the debt on time, all the time, every time you take debt, then that builds confidence. That builds your credit worthiness. So I want to kind of leave it there.
Good.
I yield to the chair.
Yes, I allowed you to go over because I think there were some very basic fundamentals for small businesses, which was necessary. So thank you very much, Howard. Could we now go on to Derrick? Derrick, can I ask you to, let's hear from you.
Thank you. Good. Thank you so much, Angela, and very good presentation, Howard. I must say, first of all, thank you for the invitation. And it's a pleasure to be here, and congrats on Governance Week 2022. I will pretty much start by brushing over some of the things that Holik said this morning as it relates to the importance of SMEs and MSMEs, which are the micro. A very quick read of some of the stuff that's captured on the IADB, etc. Says small and medium enterprises play a major role in most economies, particularly in developing economies. SMEs account for a majority of businesses, great contributor to job creation and global economic development, representing about 90% of businesses and more than 50% of employment worldwide. And in some instances, SMEs are the majority contributor to national GDP, to GDP. In emerging economies, most formal jobs are generated by SMEs, that is as high as 7 out of 10. SMEs are less likely to be able to obtain loans than large firms, and I get in very briefly into some of the stuff that Howard was talking about just now. Instead, they rely on internal funds, cash from friends, cash from family, but that can only take you so far, really, as you need to upskill your business. So requiring funds from friends and family to launch and initially run the enterprise. And it says also that Latin America and the Caribbean is said to be the second largest contributor to the global finance gap. And that's 23% of the global finance gap. And the global finance gap is about $5.1 trillion for SMEs. And finance gap being the unmet financial needs. So first we lay out that, as we all know, SMEs and in the emerging world, MSMEs, so micro, small, and medium-sized entities are critical and vital to our economies. So first, again, the obstacles, as we went through just now, lack of financial record or track record, as mentioned, and a banking system or culture, where you have to prove profitability from past performance, and also lack of training and lack of business suave. As he said, if you are financially literate and able to present a strong case of what you can achieve in the future, then maybe the bank will have a look at you. Now, also, as simple as the cost of borrowing, especially in today's environment when we are in an increasing interest rate. The US Fed is raising interest rates to combat inflation, and that's going to be pervasive in many economies. So the cost of borrowing is about to go up. It's going to increase. So that's another hindrance or obstacle to financing. And the reality, banking has its biases. You see biases to minorities, biases to race, biases to gender, sexual orientation, all sorts of biases that in reality, and not just in the first world, but even in our societies here, there are built-in biases to funding. The next thing, let's move away from the banks. We have hedge funds, we have fund companies looking to invest in companies every day. But unfortunately, most funds are looking for investment beyond $10 million. So they're not interested in your 2 million and your 5 million particularly. So that's another hurdle. Another issue that we heard mentioned today, and I need to stress this, is the heavy reliance on the owner. If you want me to be involved in your company, whether by debt or equity or anything, and you are the all and before of that company, you know everything about the company and no one else knows, you are the face, and you are the only, and you're the marketer, you're the business development, you're the operator. That's a problem. That is key man risk right there. And that is an issue for financing. And with that, I also speak about the last obstacle I will mention is company structure. You know, when you running an entity, you're running a transport company, whatever, and you're doing well, and then you have your company registered and incorporated for the sake of ease and or the sake of being myopic, you have your spouse as a director, husband or wife, who is not having any business knowledge, any financial literacy, any real abilities. You know, I'm going to get to wonder, I want to see now that resume of that director to see if they're really competent. So a lot of smaller businesses, family businesses will do things like that. You know, where there's just that one entrepreneur will start the board or say, hey, oh, here's my husband, or here's my wife, here's my aunt. Okay, it's a director. What does that mean? Where's the value in that? So now let's talk then about alternative funding away from the bank, because great job just now explaining what you need to bring to the bank. So today, well, I will say there are alternative sources of financing. However, we see a lot of that is focused on impact investing. One, and also a lot of it focused on startups. There's almost now, I don't want to say no limit, but from government organizations, from inter-regional organizations, and all sorts of organizations, other private sector and foundations, they're ready and willing to invest. But what are they looking for? They're looking for innovation. What is your next big idea that's going to save the world? What is the big world problem that you are solving? They want to see and know what is the social and economic impact of your product, of your service. They're considering sustainability. They're looking at climate finance. They will consider sustainable food. Projects that look at financial inclusion. And of course, every business will not fit any of these requirements. I mean, we wish they did. We wish that we all consider the ESGs, as I heard someone mention earlier, environmental, social, and governance. But separate from these sources, let's face it, separate from those characteristics of a business, there are businesses who just are pure capitalists, like the banks, who are profit-driven solely and unfortunately aren't considering their corporate duties, etc. And if you're talking about, again, we mentioned a supermarket or a restaurant, where's the innovation you're bringing there? Where's the startup in that, so to speak, that will make investors interested? So even though there are those alternative sources, there are limitations to the type of businesses that are willing to invest in. So you get some that are not lending then in the traditional sense. You get some that will not lend to the regular, not interested in hearing from the regular mom and pop partner shop that has done well for the last 10 years, but now wants to expand. Now, but let's say there are indeed ways to grow your business and to get the finance by which you want to grow your business. A lot of investors now are not looking at only a purely debt, but you may get debt plus equity. All right, but naturally, we know there's a difficulty in many people giving up some ownership. Some people don't want to give up even 5%. But as Marlon at the Barbados Stock Exchange, Marlon Yard said earlier today, he says 50.01% of ownership is the majority and the controlling ownership. So an investor may come in and say, okay, I want to lend, but I also I want to have some skin in the game. I want to take some equity. Then he will go through the process of valuing the company. So now we have to look at what type of records do you have. So he can value what because he maybe want to employ some cash flow, discounted cash flow method. So he needs to see what the cash flows have been for the past periods and do a discount rate of that and maybe some growth rate to calculate over time what your cash flows, your future cash flows discounted back to current value, what those are. But do you have that information? Do you have the records that he can review? Another way, if not debt plus equity, you can also consider debt plus profit sharing. Okay, you don't want to give no equity, you hold the equity, but profit sharing for the next 5 years, let's say restructure your debt over a 5-year period. I want the repayment of the debt plus a profit sharing on that. And there are targets in there you have to meet. So you have the funds, but now you're also motivated to hit some key points. You're motivated to do what you said you could do and deliver what you said you could deliver. Now, you know what? We have debt plus equity. We also have takeovers and buyouts. What if really you are no longer able to take the business to the next level? That is the reality sometimes for some MSEs. You don't have the vision, you don't have the strategy, you don't have the contacts, you don't have the access. So that may be an opportunity. It's time to walk away. I think everything you get into, you need to have an exit strategy. A succession plan to your next generation, maybe your exit strategy, or it may be a buyout. Now, understand, however, a savvy investor considering a buyout, especially where it's that key individual, may not be buying upfront due to heavy reliance on the owner. Okay, but he may be buying more shares based on performance clauses. So I'm going to buy a company, but today I'm going to take 20%. And then when there's some performance met, 9 months from now, I'm going to get another 5%, another 10%, and on, because no rational investor seeing that key man risk with that one owner who has and knows everything, it's close to his chest, he's the face of the company. It's a risk for the investor to take over or buy out that company immediately, and then that owner is gone. Or even if he remains in the company for a year, his heart isn't in it there anymore. He's in the departure lounge. He wants to go golf. He wants to go sail the world. So it's a risk. So you may have an opportunity to get a buyout, but it may be a gradual buyout. Of course, there are partnerships. Again, that is a given of equity. Another way where you give something is private capital raises. You hear a lot of this is about giving up. And we mentioned control versus care earlier today. and the need for control because you've owned this baby for the last 10, 20 years. But reality is it's a lot of giving up. Even what Howard said is now giving over your financial records to a bank. It's giving up. It's releasing something. So I think this is a really big part of financing SMEs, the ability to give up. So private capital raise is where you're a suave and you create your beautiful brochure and you knock on not 10 doors, but you knock on 50 doors and you get interest from 10 persons. And you come together and you have a first capital raise, where maybe the first capital raise you are projecting, maybe those who got in at the top can maybe 10 times in 2 years or 18 months. Later on, as business progresses, another capital raise, and this second group maybe at 5 times in 18 months, etc. But again, it means showing all your insights. Are you willing to do that? Okay, so that's the big issue there. But that's another way of doing a non-traditional ways of raising capital, raising funding. Today we see a lot of crowdfunding going on. I don't mean individual crowdfunding to bury my greater. That's what I talk about. Crowdfunding for businesses like websites like WeFunder. I've invested a small bit on that website WeFunder because my wife saw a company doing beauty things that she thought was a great thing. So I invested in it. We'll see how it goes. Now I'm locked in for 10 years. but we'll see. We'll see. Again, as we always say, you only invest in what you understand. So she understood it, so we invested. Here you go. Then you have peer-to-peer lending and peer-to-peer or B2B lending platforms where you cut out the middleman. There's no more bank, but some of these platforms guarantee that they match you to a lender in maybe 48 hours. One website is Prosper. So that is another one. And, and then, so there's a lot of the alternative sources. So there are out there, but as Howard said, one, you gotta be business savvy. The next requirement, you gotta let go of something. I also wrote down here, reducing costs is also a method of finance. Reducing costs, being efficient is a method of financing your company. So if we can knock on our government's door for government fees, government policies, and we get a greater ease of doing business, etc., that would even help in our finances. And naturally, you're spending more, you're spending less, so you have more to put to the business. Now, the reason I mentioned takeovers and buyouts, give me a 3-minute countdown, please. I want to get through this, but don't take up too much time. So why I mentioned takeovers and buyouts is because worldwide, there are many profitable SMEs that are owned by baby boomers, okay? Businesses with more than 20 years in operation, but these businesses have no succession plan and no exit strategy. So this is a huge opportunity for investors now, because the baby boomers are all retiring and the kids are not interested in the business. They don't have a succession plan, no exit strategy. So there is opportunity, huge opportunity for investors to come on now and do one of those buyout or takeover strategies. Really, I mean, let's consider for a moment why Saul in Barbados just sold. You can only imagine the founder. He's in age. His senior kids are older also for whatever reason, but something like that. Saul is not an SME. I think that considered large because SMEs are categorized based on the GDP of the country. So that would be beyond SME, but that's an instance where the founder got up in age and made a decision to make the sale. And because today it's about family-owned businesses, family businesses, I want to just pivot a little bit to speak about that specifically. But one thing I would say is that one of the benefits that often comes with alternative financing is advisory services. Financing that comes with training, financing that comes with coaching, and comes with advice. Because again, The bank is going to lend you and hope you go away and work magic. But investors, when they invest in you, maybe some equity or profit sharing on their targets, etc., it comes with advisory services also. Now, this morning, we heard a lot about why family-owned businesses tend to die like in the third generation. I just want to tap back to some of those. Again, it's a poor succession planning. It's a lack of training and coaching. It's the lack of those independent directors who actually tell the truth. It's the lack of funding access. It's the lack of an exit strategy, the lack of growth strategy. Now, I'll put it to you that all of these are possibly solved by establishing a family office run by seasoned professionals. Because that family office, what will it do? It will build your strategy. It's going to work on your succession planning. It's even going to coach and train the next generation. A good family office to which you give over yourself, it even helps select your children's universities that they go to and help coach them in the areas that they ought to study. All of that. So a lot of the problems that we linked here mentioned are by giving over, again, giving up over to a family office that is run by seasoned professionals. And almost done. One thing Kamala asked earlier or said earlier, she'd like to also know about when you know the business is dead. Now I want to go to relationships now. We have our wives and our girlfriends. And the day the girlfriend leaves or the wife leaves, we're like shocked. Oh my God, what just happened? But we don't realize that mentally, she was out the door 6 months ago. She was out and gone 9 months ago, but only now physically she left. It's the same with business. The day those doors are closing, the spirit was gone 6, 9 months ago, a year ago. So you've got to be able to see the client and recognize the client and be honest. And the reality is, when you know that you're dipping too heavily into your pension, into the child's education, and it's a third mortgage on your home, you know there's a serious problem and a change needs to come. And my final parting shot at this time, as it relates to financing of SMEs, I would say that I think Barbados has broken the code, because Barbados, our exit strategy is to sell to a Trinidadian company. Seems to be that. Thank you. I'll pause for now.
Love that, Derrick. Love it. That's why the patrons most probably say they don't care for the Trinis too much, right? They're coming to take everything. All right. Yeah. Very good indeed. Thank you for that information there. Ian, off to you now.
All right. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Just making sure you all can hear me clearly.
Yes.
All right. So great. I just want to start off by thanking the Institute for giving me the opportunity to present to you, and also to thank Howard and Derrick. They did their jobs very well and didn't leave me with much to cover. Be that as it may, we have SME in the headline, and SME is really quite a broad space, because as Howard would have pointed out, it begins with startups, right? And you refer to that as small s. And then you could go all the way down to fairly large companies in a Caribbean context, but that's really the M. And so I think I need to define where I'm pitching, just so that we have the clarity and the understanding in terms of the discussion to follow. And where I am pitching this discussion is really in the middle, right? There are companies that are beyond startup, companies who have some level of track record, to take the first couple of bullets from Howard. And basically what I would refer to as the big S and the M in the SME. And so when we are speaking to family-owned businesses, the real pitch here is the larger family-owned businesses. And so the headline, the title that we're going with is Financing SMEs for Growth. And in that context of the big S and the M, we really had a lot of these discussions for more than 20 years now. And I have actually been part of a, I'm just thinking when Kamala asked me to come and speak on this particular topic, and I'm thinking back, oh boy, since my days at PricewaterhouseCoopers, where we had the first corporate finance unit at the time in Trinidad, we were meeting with potential clients, having discussions around financing and listing for businesses in Trinidad and Tobago. After that, I would have gone into stockbroking, as Angela would have mentioned. And there again, you would have had the interactions as being lead brokers for some of these same listings. And I'm just talking through a little bit of my track through the industry and going to wealth management, and you're having conversations again with some of the same entities, this time from their banking relationships and from dealing with things like trust services and so on, which would be the session to come. And then moving a little bit further again into asset management, where you now sit and you hold the paper that these companies that are issuing to the market, you're now the investor, right? And even companies on the M side would have paper that would be accessed by third-party investors. And then you're going to, Angela mentioned sitting on a bank's board, and you have the credit committees, and you have these subsidiary boards related to capital markets, investments, portfolio management, trust services. And now I sit as the chair of the TTSC. And I say, the TTSC being the Trinidad and Tobago Stock Exchange. And I'm saying all of this to you to kind of make the point that I've seen these issues from all different angles. And over the years, there have been many, many discussions around SMEs, how to get financing and how to help SMEs grow. And those conversations then evolves into the conversation, some of the conversations that we're having now around loan financing, venture capital, private equity. And then ultimately, the hope is to see a company listed on the Trinidad and the stock exchanges, right? Whether that be Trinidad, Barbados, Jamaica. And we look at the Jamaica experience and we see that there's a fair amount of that taking place, but not so much in Trinidad and Barbados. And when we haven't had all of these conversations for however long that we've had them, you look outside at these public exchanges and you don't see the number of companies that you would like to see. And then you look at the market as a whole and you see that there are many unlisted companies that are doing just fine. And the truth is, and that's where Howard started, that many businesses still prefer and are still dependent on bank financing. And so I would pause there and ask, and that's effectively what I did. What is missing from this conversation? Because as Derrick pointed out, there's a progression, right? You start with your bank financing, but you eventually move on to different forms of capital raise. And so many times in different formats, we're having these conversations over and over, and then we turn around and we blame the SME business owner. And we say, you know what? They don't want to list. They don't want to seek any other kind of financing. They just want bank financing. And what I really want to ask is, what can we say or do differently that hasn't been said before? And so in thinking about it, I would put it to you that this is the first time I'm going to say what I'm going to say in a public forum. I've had these conversations with different potential clients, but I would like to have feedback and comments in a Q&A so we can have a discussion around it. But I want to start from a different place. Growth, financing for growth. And we approach these conversations from the perspective of growth because as human nature, right? We want more revenues, we want more profits, we want bigger, we want better, we want larger. And so the word growth in a headline is what attracts us to the session. But in speaking to many owners of small businesses, I don't think growth is their true starting point. There's a disconnect between what people say they want and what their actions convey. And based on those discussions, who comprise this SME space, I think what they want more than anything else is to continue as they are. And for those of us on the consultancy side, that might come as a shock. But for most business owners, I think that's their starting point. On this side of the fence, we look at it at financing for SMEs as a business decision that you have to make. And there's validity to that, right? How do you finance growth from that perspective? But my guess is that from the entrepreneur side, entrepreneurship is a lifestyle choice. And really what you are asking is, your starting point is, how do I remain with an entrepreneur's lifestyle? What is that lifestyle? That's the idea of being your own boss, creating your own space, navigating the waters in the way that you want to navigate it. That is, for me, the attraction of entrepreneurship. And Derrick spoke about, the number of time, I mean, there was an earlier panel and Derrick mentioned it, the number of companies that fail in the sector. And that's the truth. Entrepreneurship is hard. Owning and running an SME is hard. And so if you didn't want this lifestyle, you would likely be working in another company that is, for all intents and purposes, a different way out. I wouldn't say it's an easy way out, but it's a different way out, right? And so if there's a lifestyle choice, then the most important issue for you is, how do you remain in the game? How do you maintain that choice? And so I would put it to you that the first goal of a business, especially a small business, is to remain in business. And if we take off on what Derrick just explained, that's really, compounding and adding to his point, that you want to remain in business, but that goal to really get the attention that it deserves. My suggestion is that growth will come as a consequence of your business acumen. That's what you got into in the first place. That's what you know. What you really need is a financing strategy that at its core keeps you in the game. And if we frame it like that, then we can look at the last couple of years, right? Enter COVID-19 into the mix, and most businesses were asked to just stand still. And that gives you, more than anything else, the appreciation of just how important staying in the game really is. And I would further suggest to you that growth is a natural consequence of staying in the game. Because those that can't stay in the game, well, they fold. And then you get to capture that market share. And while I'm talking about staying in the game, I want you to just think to what Howard was speaking to when he was talking about that cash flow management and that cash cycle. Because those are key elements of how you stay in the game, right? And that's an internal part of the discussion. But let's now talk about financing in that context. And we're talking external financing here, whereas Howard kind of give you a perspective from internal financing. The way to stay in the game is to have a financing structure and a capital structure that matches your objectives. And we go for bank financing because it is convenient. And that convenience worked in an economy where growth was almost guaranteed. And in a Trinidad and Tobago context, that was really because of our oil and gas windfall. So survival was not so much an issue because we were part of a growing pie. You did better by operating in that growing economy. The truth is that windfall is no more and growth is no longer guaranteed. So now we have to think more carefully and more deeply about our capital structure. How to structure our business so that we have a greater likelihood of staying in the game and as a result, maintaining the entrepreneurship lifestyle that we have become so attached to. If all we have is bank financing and you run into a problem, then your lifestyle choice of entrepreneurship comes under challenge. You could have bank financing and they could offer you refinancing, but then you have to work much harder with greater risks. And drawing on from Derrick's points again, we talked about, not wanting to give up anything and wanting to, you're working for yourself. When you are in that kind of situation with the bank, you're no longer working for yourself, you're in fact working to pay the bank. Remember when people in the SME space say that, their biggest fear is losing control of their company. What exactly do you think happens in substance when you have strict bank covenants to meet and that you have to follow terms and conditions that compel you to conduct your business in a certain way? So you might have legal title to your shares, but in substance, you are no longer the owner of your business. So the question that I think my two colleagues kind of put to you, and I will put to you again, is it better to put the governance systems in place upfront? Is it better to consider sharing ownership with people who can provide capital and so protect your downside so that you stay in the game? At the stage when you find yourself in financial difficulties, other financing options become more expensive because you are asking for external capital in a higher risk venture compared to when things are running smoothly. I cannot emphasize enough the number of times that companies have come to me at a point in time when they are out of luck with the bank. And now they're talking about, well, can you find an equity partner? And the truth is, at that point in time, it's too late. Or even if it is not too late, it is extremely difficult. The fear that you had from giving up before, you now have to give up more. And if you put that in the context where you appreciate the key issue is maintenance of your life, your entrepreneurial lifestyle, then you should take these steps when things are going well to balance your capital structure so that you have the space to achieve two things. And notice I said balance your capital structure. That means there is room for debt financing. This is not an anti-bank discussion, right? If you balance your capital structure proactively, you have space to fall if things don't go well. That's when we talk about the safety net. And then you have the space to grow if things go according to plan. And that's where you now get the financing for growth. That's the trick that everyone misses. Financing for growth comes because you decided to finance in order to ensure that you would remain in business. Financing for growth comes as a consequence of financing for stability. It's not one or the other. And this will be true, especially in the challenging economy that we are in now, where success is not guaranteed as it was, say, 20 years or 30 years, over the last 20 or 30 years. And I want to link this to investing, right? Portfolio investing. Many times I would discuss with clients what I refer to as a barbell strategy. And that is where you have a pool of capital that is extremely safe on one side of the barbell and another pool of capital that takes in high risk on the other side. And if you have one side that is extremely safe, then the most you can lose is on the other side of the barbell where you're taking high risk. But the balance of that barbell gives you the feeling of comfort so that you can take the risk that you need to take to grow. The different types of non-bank financing are all there for you, but understanding how to use the financing available is what is often missing from the discussion. And that's really what I'm trying to zero in this session. If you don't know how to pull these together, then all you have are already products, right? Derrick spoke to some of those things. You have preference share financing as a product. You might have private equity financing as a product. You will have listing on the stock exchange as a product. But these are not products. These are tools to help you position a capital structure that matches your personal objectives as an entrepreneur and by extension, your business objectives. Your capital structure ultimately helps you to deal with issues such as independent directors, and that was discussed in the earlier session. Your capital structure will help you to deal with issues such as having professional management in place, and Derrick touched on that. Your capital structure will help you to deal with succession planning and dealing with intergenerational family wealth issues, which is the session to come. This session that we're in here right now sits in the middle because the capital structure is fundamental to those two issues. And the capital structure is really the basis for addressing all these issues properly, and if I may even add, addressing it sensibly. So you finance for growth by financing for stability. And you achieve stability by having different financial options available to you when you need it. And maybe I should rephrase that. Those options available to you before you need it. Because if you look to have it when you are in actual need, then it might be too late. Borrowing when you don't need money is expensive though. And that's where we talk about taking on equity participation when you don't need the money. It's less expensive and it provides you with buffers that can make your business more profitable in the long run. And as we talk to that, as I close out, I just want to say a few words specifically on listing on the SME exchange of the Trinidad and Tobago Stock Exchange, because as you know, We're talking financing for SMEs. There is an SME board on the Trinidad and Tobago Stock Exchange. And as we talk about that, let's go back to capital structure. Because one of the reasons why debt financing is so attractive in good times is that you see the revenue growth as an entrepreneur. And by using debt, you get to deduct interest costs from your income statement. And Howard was speaking to the income statement a while back, right? And after you deduct the interest cost, you pay taxes on the balance. But you now have an incentive if you're listing on the SME market in Trinidad, that you're given a tax holiday for 5 years and a further tax shelter for another 5 years. And so suddenly it does not matter if you are financed by debt or equity. The tax shield is the same. And from that tax shield, you now have a bigger cash flow to decide if to dividend or to reinvest for growth. And Howard was making the point as the importance of cash flow. Consider if you took on equity to pay down debt. That helps you to improve your cash flow. It removes your interest costs from your income statement. That pushes your profitability higher. That profitability is tax exempt for the period of the exemption. And those funds, instead of paying dividends, can be reinvested into your business, leading to faster growth. Shareholders, including yourself, can see the value of their shareholding increase because you have publicly traded shares that you can use your shares over time to acquire other businesses. You now become the strong person in the game, or you can pledge your shares as collateral for your own personal financing needs. And Angela, I think, spoke of Mia Motley at the start, and I want to say that these types of initiatives that that have been put forward in Trinidad will contribute to economic activity if we take them on board. And that's why I want to compliment our government, and specifically the Minister of Finance, for taking this step and putting these tax incentives in place. And just one final point before I leave. I can't really say too much about it right now, but there may soon be a formal launch in collaboration with the Ministry of Finance. This is with the Trinidad and Tobago Stock Exchange and the Ministry of Finance, regarding a mentorship initiative that will help to guide SMEs to get them to a place where they can list and thrive on the SME exchange, on the Trinidad and Tobago Stock Exchange. A lot has been spoken over the days of this conference that can be put in a practical sense if business owners take the time to level up and move forward. And so as I close, let me repeat that we are no longer in a place where we can expect growth to just happen because we are open for business. We now have to navigate a much more uncertain landscape. And financing for growth means first financing to maintain your lifestyle as an entrepreneur. That means comfort, that means stability. Then it is because you are comfortable in your space as a business owner. Remember, you are the one who brought all of this to the table in the first place, that you can utilize your talents and skills to produce the business growth and results that you desire. Growth is the end product. To get there, you have to engage in a process. I took a different angle today and decided to engage in the thought process that can lead you to taking the steps to that physical process. As I said, this is the first time I've publicly tried to frame this discussion in this manner. I hope I have added some value to the discussion, and I look forward to your feedback and comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ian, for an absolutely excellent presentation. I have to tell you, I was absorbed in it. I guess because I kind of saw myself in a bit of what you were saying as an entrepreneur. I just most probably never thought of myself as an entrepreneur when I was younger, till somebody made a joke and said, "Oh my God, you can't debate Angela being an entrepreneur." So young, she was always in the bloody real estate market or whatever, but should, say far. But yes, I really think there was some really thought-provoking ideas there that you gave us to think about as individuals. And I think this aspect that if you're talking this latter part of this mentorship aspect, I think that's fantastic, because really, I think people want a certain lifestyle, and that comes with being your own boss. But being your own boss to some extent does involve a certain amount of responsibility, clearly, because you really have people working for you. There is a commitment actually in maintaining that they have a job that is secure. And at the same time, you have to always be thinking, how do you reinvent your organization because you become passive, you know?
Angela, that's where the stability part comes in, right? Because before you can think about growth, if you are on a if you put yourself through your capital structure and the way you finance yourself on that stable footing, you mentioned employees there, you really can attract good talent if you are running an overdraft to the limit in the bank, and every day your accountant is answering calls. You know, the ability to attract talent there. And so then you become more and more alone. And so that's where I really try to get the conversation. Put myself, I'm happy to get your feedback because I put myself, I mean, it really occurred to me because I myself now, as a consultant on my own, is entrepreneurship, right? So you put yourself in those shoes and you think, well, what does I really want? I had offers after I stepped out of industry to go back in and work in different companies, and I turned them down. And I asked myself, why did I turn it down? What is it that I want? It's a lifestyle choice. And I think
Definitely
that's
it's a lifestyle choice. So,
that-
so if I
that
give you a little bit of joke on that lifestyle choice, and part of it will be maybe because I'm on the earth so long, I actually carve out a day a week just to be with my grandchildren. I have no biological mind, but the choice is, it's a choice I make. So a meeting could be requested for a day. I decide I'm taking the day off, and I would say, well, try another day. I'm just not available. That doesn't mean to say there's an odd meeting I wouldn't do, but really, I'm not going to take on anything, because that for me is a great joy. And that was part of my, I guess, my lifestyle choice. I mean, I want to be able to, not only for myself, but for the people that work with me, that you can give them a company that hopefully it's stable. It also, they can balance life, because I mean, this virtual world has really done wonders in terms of, you know, people can work from home, and we have the technology, and I think that's part of it, investing in technology to make things as, you know, easy as possible. You know, actually physically you have to be somewhere. So yeah, I mean, for me, I would say I really enjoy the fact that, one, yes, I can create employment for people. Two, that I can train them, because they are going to be the leaders of tomorrow. I'm convinced, you know, your youths are the leaders of tomorrow. But how do you help them? How do you mentor them? How do you give them the opportunity? How do you train them? I mean, these are all, and also, how do you, what it is you do that's going to make them good leaders? And so there's just so much you could really put together to say, as an entrepreneur, a lot of things can excite you. You know, I mean, I am a baby boomer by definition, and I was told, all those, you don't buy off those baby boomer companies. I mean, they're ready to go. But again, it depends on the baby boomer. The baby boomer, if you want to keep your mind as a baby boomer, you will stay there. But I have no intention of being there. I think, well, now I'm with grandchildren. I mean, maybe a little off topic, but to me, it's important. I'm going to learn how they think, because as you interact with different youths at different stages, the Y diseases, Z, whatever, they're different. They think differently. So I can't bring a baby boomer mind and try to tell them, when now, you know, they look at things like differently, totally. I remember when this thing with everybody on Facebook, and everybody's on it, I say, oh, I know, it's like going for a glass of water. So no sense fighting it. That's a fact. Moving on. Accept it. What it is we can do to change the way we think. And it depends on how much you really want to do it. I'll give an example which will show you the extent I would go as a baby boomer. I have a grandnephew, he's 20-something, and we used to watch cartoons together. And I couldn't understand why he was laughing at certain things. I decided to go and listen to cartoons galore till I could understand that pitch, because the pitch is different, right? There's what young people hear. So that when next we're watching it, I'm laughing the same time he is. It depends on how far you are prepared to go to understand what is coming down the pipeline, right? And it's I mean, I reached a stage where I just see so many opportunities that I just don't worry, because I don't worry. Worry is never going to help you. So just take it, learn to be a little detached when you have a problem, sit away from it and get through it. But I mean, at the end of the day, what we're looking is, how do we help SMEs? And a big part of it is mentoring. I think there's some people have great ideas, but they just don't have the discipline of knowing what to do. I mean, let's go back to Howard. Howard went through that whole cycle. I mean, we might theoretically know it, but when you put it down in that timeline, I mean, to somebody who's now coming into business, it really, sharpens you. It really does sharpen you. And I think that those are the sort of fundamental or the basic things that we need to bring them along. And we need a lot more mentorship, I think, in entrepreneurship. At least that's what I would say. Yes, Derrick.
What I could say to that is absolutely. And you can't throw money at every problem. You can't just keep throwing money at every problem. And as I said before, some of the value of new financing, it comes with that mentoring. It comes with that with advisory services. Because if I'm going to put my money into it, someone's going to put their money into it and take a 20% stake, or they're going to want repayment plus a profit sharing. I know the investor now has a vested interest. Yes, the bank has a vested interest in getting its money back too, but the bank has a tolerance, a bad debt tolerance that is, it's diminishing, but it's there. But the investor has skin in the game now, so they're keen on seeing success. So with my money, it's coming advisory services, a look through, and a medical checkup, periodic medical checkup, ever so often, to make sure that you're doing the things you said you do. How about doing it this way? Who do you have among you? What is the structure? Do you need to hire in some other expertise? Do you need to have them on your company full time, or do you need to outsource some of your key capabilities? So as you said, that mentoring and the advisory services that comes with it, the bank gets a walk away, but a lot of the new investors don't do that.
And I think you also gave some very good examples, Derrick, in terms of how entrepreneurs could look at getting some financing. Whether it is the purchase of some of the shares, which of course I'll tell you people wouldn't really want to do, just to share my profits. It's like, it will be different strokes for different folks. And I would say one of the things, particularly as an entrepreneur, is who you're in business with. By God, trust is the top of the list. You have to
due diligence isn't only about numbers,
right? I mean, key. The minute you don't feel it, you're gonna pull back. As an entrepreneur, you're gonna pull back. And one of the things is, I'm going to go for the woman more than anything here for the man. The women are extremely strong in the intuition side of it, right? I think the men doesn't say they can't do it, but I think women are much stronger. And you need to lean into that thing called intuition, particularly when you're looking at personas and when you're doing business. So to me, that as an entrepreneur, I'm talking straight. Trust is 100% there before I will do business with you. If I feel like inkling of anything, forget it. I don't need it that bad. And that's a wonderful part about being an entrepreneur. You don't have to have everything. You know when to say goodbye. So any client who want to come and don't want to do what I think should be done, I say go down the street, find somebody else. Because you know what? Nobody could buy your name. Just remember, that's all you have at the end of the day, is your name. I don't care how big your company is. It's going to be a name. Because that is what you are building as an entrepreneur to leave to some extent as a legacy of the organization that you will leave. And hopefully what you're trying to do is build leaders, managers inside of there that holds the same value system and ethics that builds the brand. Because I think, even though I'm an entrepreneur, and yes, many people say Angela is not Aegis. Angela founded Aegis, but she's not Aegis. I have enough underneath that I could go away and it wouldn't fall down. I went away for 2 months, whatever year before pre-COVID, and the company didn't fall down. So my point is, you have to invest in your people, you have to trust them, you have to train them. And I think this is, entrepreneurs have to start small. We all start small. And over time, I mean, I listened to Ian. Ian, you may have now started whatever it is you say in your consultancy, but Ian, you have a very good reputation. So don't forget how powerful that is over time. Because that's really how you build your business, I think, by your reputation. So is it we have to ask our colleagues on the call if they have anything they want to ask us?
Yes, I did put on the chat earlier. If anyone had any questions, they could let us know, or they can raise their hands as well. So I'm just checking to see if there was anyone who unmuted, but I don't think so. And I think that's because our panelists were so comprehensive.
Absolutely.
You know? Yeah, I had questions I was going to ask. Are we going to talk about crowdsourcing? Derrick did it. You know, that whole lecture Howard gave, I just had to put on the chat. Persons who need to learn, we have Finance for Directors workshop coming up, because it is so critical that we understand, as you say, you must have financial literacy before you look to say you are going to get financing for your business as well. You know, so unless anyone has any question, you can raise your hand. But I wanted to ask Ian, because you dealt with the whole area of persons also being able to use stocks and so, but we intended to have a session on this. We haven't done so as yet, but there are special incentives that government placed for SMEs to become listed on the stock exchange. What would you advise would be some of the key things? And I know we just have a few minutes remaining. What are the key things you as an SME need to know that puts you in a position to be able to benefit from this, from these incentives?
Yeah, I mentioned it in passing, but not necessarily as as explicit. So I think the attraction for a company listing, and I wouldn't go into the details of what size you need to be and all of those things. We can get that into it's right there on the stock exchange website. So I'm actually inviting you to visit the website and get more familiar with the information if you do have that type of interest, right? Because you will probably get more out of it than me just saying, rattling off some stuff here. But the real important part is providing that you qualify as an SME, and I think most people, in terms of where we are pitching this session to, would be in the SME space. It is the tax incentive, and that's why I spoke to your capital structure, because for the first 5 years post-listing, the government has waived your taxes. So there is no corporation tax on your business for 5 years. Now that's a huge benefit to you, as I was explaining, from the perspective that you're agnostic as to whether you now have debt or equity in your capital structure. After a further 5 years, that your tax rate goes to 50%, right? And that really is what is positioned for you, because if you had you do your maths, you put it in dollars. We have, so one of the things that made this not such a big deal before was, and all of us come through the accounting firms and stuff, so we know that there are elements of businesses not paying the full taxes that they may be required to pay, right? But you have a revenue authority that is coming along, and therefore what you would have seen as the past is not necessarily how the future will be. And therefore it's about not just putting your house in order, because you have had to do that anyway, but you now get a chance to put your house in order in a way that also benefits you and your business financially. Because yes, you're facing the market. Yes, you may have a little bit level of scrutiny that you may have to face. But as Howard and Derrick pointed out, you're going to have that to varying degrees anyway. And there's a financial benefit for you to now do so, because the tax break that you're going to get. So the requirements of what you need to meet and so on, there'll be certain capital levels, and most companies would be able to fit into that. So we wouldn't need to go into that detail there. But really is to appreciate what I'm having is the part that you wouldn't get from reading. They appreciate what the tax incentive really means for you and to you.
I know that Marlon has his hand
Yes.
up. We'll invite him now. But Ian,
Yes.
my very brief follow-up to that is, does it matter whether the SME lists what percentage of ownership? So for instance, we had Michelle from Honeybee share that, Honeybun, forgive me, She listed only 20%. So 80% is still retained by the family.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah, so the percentage does matter. There's a little bit of, I don't want to speak too definitively on it right now because there is some clarifications that I'm saying the stock exchange is seeking. But
Good evening, Gary.
25% of new shares is really what the requirement is. Again, if you were to think that through, that does not, and Howard pointed it out, I believe, you're not giving away your company in any way, form, or fashion. You still maintain control. I think Derrick pointed out that this is 51.1%. You're still in control of your business. And you know, so there are fears, and we know that there are fears, but it's now talking through. Yes, I understand. When I put it to you from the perspective of maintaining your lifestyle choice, now we're now talking to desire versus fear, and usually desire wins in that context. That's why I try to reframe the discussion a little bit in this session. I see.
Yeah.
My colleague Marlon.
Thank you. What I will say from the very beginning, I really enjoyed this session today, and both from Derrick, I like the cash cycle, putting things into perspective. But Ian, you know, I'm always trying to find ways to persuade people that you need to consider, as you say, structuring your capital a little differently. And this whole lifestyle angle, it resonates with me because, you know, I'm like you, Angela, and everybody else on this call. I'm a baby boomer, and I've been saying it a long time. I've been saying it a long time. You know, even though you are a baby boomer, you need to understand and think like the millennials and the generation Z's and Y's. You know, and sometimes my daughter, because she's in that category, she keeps me on track and lets me understand. But this whole thing of lifestyle maintenance and being an entrepreneur is very much resonating with me, you know, because of where I'm at in my own life. The fact too that even though I'm an employee of the stock exchange, my wife and I, we have our own business, and it resonates with me. She isn't, and she like me isn't an accountant by profession, but she chose to leave her job and for us to buy a business and, you know, branch out there and do our own thing. And so this resonates with me. The other thing that resonated with me too, Ian, and maybe we should talk some more about it, is this whole question of mentorship. And this is something that we too are embarking on at the Stock Exchange. We've partnered with the Small Business Association, we've partnered with the Ministry of Energy and the Business Development, and we've partnered with a regional finance body to fund this initiative that we have, where we develop an ecosystem where companies can go through, and is like a 24 to 30 month project, where companies can go through 3 phases. Well, we have 3 phases to the project: sensitization and education, basically educating people and letting them know, and it's specifically for SMEs, you know, the benefits of listing and how you can really develop. And I can make sure I use your angle with the lifestyle entrepreneurs. That's it. And then the other phase is the diagnostic and capacity building. And again, we're using the professionals in the marketplace, the accountants, the lawyers, the marketers, to help companies to see where they are and see where they need to get to be able to qualify for listing on the exchange, and also qualify to meet the requirements of the FSC, the regulatory framework. And then the final phase is the actual raising capital and listing on our, well, we call it the innovation and growth market. We rebranded and renamed it the innovation and growth market from the junior market, but it's specifically for SMEs. And the whole idea for that process is to mentor companies through the whole idea of wanting to list and raise capital and listing on the stock exchange. So that is very important.
Yeah, well, Marlon, I mean, I would give credit. Jamaica was the one who pioneered this, right? They would have had the IDB again. They would have, and they set up their SME market, and they had their mentorship program and so on. And then we looked at that, and we had our discussions internally, and you know, we put forward something, and the interactions with the central bank and the Ministry of Finance refined it a little bit. And like I said, the soon our minister would want to put that forward. And yeah, we have a discussion with you all, and at the end of the day, we really see how, this is how Caribbean people help each other.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Mhm.
And then finally, the whole question that the whole issue of the tax benefit. We tried that a few years back. Our minister at the time, Minister of Finance, put something on the table. But what they did, there was a snafu in the legislation in that we put forward the idea that at least 25% of the company must be made available to the marketplace. When the legislation was drafted, they flipped it and said no one shareholder could own no more than 25%. So right away, as a non-starter before you start. And we've been trying to get that corrected time immemorial, and it hasn't worked. But we're in a stage now in Barbados where we've converged our tax rate to a maximum of 5% and a minimum of 1.5%. So it's a moot point now, I mean, 0% is still good as compared to 5%, but it's a moot point as it relates to that tax benefit. But that was the snafu, and I think this was as far back as 2012. We got this we were able to come in, again, using the Jamaica Stock Exchange model. So that's my contribution. Thank you.
Excellent. Absolutely excellent. I really think this was a marvelous session. Myself, I've learned a lot. And what came out of it for me, the old boys, right? The boys line, and they share all the information, right? Women haven't been able to do that as well as the boys, But I think the women, I get it. But I think we need both men and women, because really conversations men with men is different. Conversation women is different. Conversation men and women are different too. But I just thought it was such healthy dialogue that was here, and some very innovative ideas. I'm beginning to think, coming out of this is me selfishly thinking here now, people, can we not have a group of people like this where we can meet and exchange ideas? I mean, I know some of you in Barbados, the rest of us in Trinidad. I don't know, I'm in Barbados right now, actually, so I can have a drink and we can talk, you know what I mean? It's just having that healthy exchange of ideas and thoughts that you can't do on a Zoom as you can in real. And the reason I tell you that, I've been Zooming with people internationally for 2 years. So, when you're in a Zoom meeting, unless you have something to say, you don't really say anything because you're taking in a lot of knowledge, right? So they had this meeting with all of this. They were supposed to meet in New York. I said, Angela, why don't, I was asked to go to New York, so I went to New York. Hell, it is so different when you're real, because people, I would never think I'm funny. Would you agree? And then this person who's been seeing me on Zoom for so, Angela, but you're really funny. I said, funny? I would never describe myself as funny. Anyhow, but you could have those little sidebar talks, so you could interject. You can't do that on a Zoom. I mean, I'm just bloody interjecting, and I think my time is up and I should come off. But I really think, Derrick and Marlon, I'm in Barbados, and I hope I can get to meet you when I'm here. Okay? Right?
When are you leaving? When are you leaving? When are you leaving, Angela?
I'm leaving on Sunday, but I'm here for George Lamming. I had him burial memorial today, and I think the burial was today, but the memorial is tomorrow. Right? I think it's Mia Motley insisted that there be something, but he didn't want anything public. He didn't want no state funeral or nothing like that. So I'm here.
Well, I want to grab opportunities. So, what are you doing this evening?
Good question. They all left and went to the beach, I think, and left me. So that is George Lamming's grandchildren. They went, and his daughter. Because I had this serious session to here, I was just told they've gone to the beach, so I'm stuck here. So
I will make sure. I'll make sure
numbers I can harass them. Okay.
I'll make sure we exchange numbers in the chat. I have a function this evening, and you're welcome to join me. Let me say, for a parting shot, I'm a believer in math and a believer in numbers. But today I talked a lot about what we give up as owner and what you can give up to get. So even though I'm a believer in math, I will want to say that sometimes 50% is greater than 100%. So for me, that's where I want to leave it for me today on this discussion.
Anybody has parting words that they want to say?
I'm not part of the panel, but to support Derrick. 100% of $10,000 is far less than 10% of $100 million.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So bear that in mind when you talk to people who are entrepreneurs. And I'm done.
I'm a firm believer in that equation. Okay. Don't think you want to need 100% because your 100% might be too small and you take 10% of one huge thing, that much better. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
Derrick?
Yeah.
Howard?
Yes. What happens is that we have a challenge, and the challenge is it has to do with entrepreneurs not believing that they will have control if they sell their shares. And when I say sell the shares, whether it's 25% or 10%, and I keep pointing out to people that Macau is 51% owned by the Sapgans, and it is still treated as a quote unquote family business. You know, I mean, but they adhere to all the corporate governance and all the laws and stuff. You know, they hold their shareholders meeting, they pay their semi-annual dividends, etc., etc., etc. So they act like a listed company, but people still perceive them to be a family-owned business. You know, and I keep telling people like that. We have a lot of companies in Trinidad and Tobago which could easily qualify for the SME listing on the stock exchange, easily. You know, in terms of the level of sales, etc., 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 the criteria that is set out. We even have some who will qualify for full listing on the stock exchange. But I think it has a lot to do with how do we convince people that you would not lose control. And the thing about it is when you do it, you actually monetize the business in such a way that even if the grandchildren no longer interested in the business, they have a currency that they can trade in instead of actually getting into the business. So we need to convince that. So my part in short is that, yes, you start out, most of the companies who start out as small and medium, they depend significantly on bank debt. And that has not changed over the last X decades. You know, they still rely a lot on bank debt. But bank debt, and this is just to bring in Kamala here because I know she wanted her thing in the conversation, bank debt could lead to real debt. You know, an abuse of bank debt would lead to a leverage that will not allow you to tolerate any volatility in the top line. Yeah. So at some point in time, as Ian said, you need to balance that capital structure. And I'm a big believer in that. You know, ascertaining the optimum capital structure may be an illusion, but there's a part where you can trend to that leads you to that optimum capital structure. And as a good business person, and I refer to the person being that business person being the profit expert, they will have a feel. They will know the level of debt that makes them uncomfortable. You know, so they can establish that capital structure that can lead them to deal with volatility as well as sustainability. You know, and that is basically my part in short.
Excellent. Ian? Dottin?
I would like to steal Howard's line. Debt can lead to debt. That is profound because it's not just debt in terms of the company, it's also in terms of the entrepreneur, right? The stress that you find yourself under when you have a bank obligation, I mean, in this industry long time, and we talk to many people and the kind of situations they find themselves, heart trouble, stress, those types of things. There's one particular instance I know of a family member. They were put into receivership and the person died of a heart attack. Right? Those things are real, and so Howard's line there is not just for companies, also for the entrepreneur itself. And I think that's something to remember. That could lead to that, and so the balance. It is the balance and setting yourself, as I put forward in my presentation. Setting yourself up to stay in the game more than anything else is what will bring you your good.